Welcome to the Healthpreneur Podcast. My name is Uriel Kame, New York Times bestselling author, former professional athlete, and founder of Healthpreneur, the world's leading company helping health and fitness experts start and scale high-end coaching businesses. If you want to attract more clients, learn how to convert them without feeling salesy, and deliver an amazing program for them on the back end, if you want to be inspired by what others just like you have gone through and how you can do the same no matter what life throws your way, then you are in the right place, because every single week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to be bringing you the best to help you take your knowledge and expertise to the next level with your health or fitness coaching business. And if you enjoy what you see and hear and would like to take your business to the next level, then I invite you to check out our free online training over at healthpreneurgroup.com/training. And for now, let's get into today's episode. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the show. Yuri here with you. I've got a special guest on today's episode. His name is Dr. Alan Turner, a fellow Canadian, just down the road, kind of, just outside Toronto. But excited to have him on the show because we're going to talk about some cool stuff. And as you guys know, I've got no idea what he's going to throw at me. So Alan, before we jump into how we can do our best to problem solve and troubleshoot and get clarity around one specific issue for you, tell our audience about who you are, what you do, and then we'll jump into that.
Well, I've been a chiropractor for going on 38 years, and I practice in a small town. And I very quickly realized that in order to stay busy, we were very busy to begin with. We were seeing over 200 visits a week within 3 months of opening the clinic. Wow. And very quickly went to 400 visits a week. And I realized that it was a small town, and we had a lot of people from the town coming to us. But in order to stay busy, we needed to be able to track people from a greater area. So that's when we got into kind of different niches. The first niche that we became involved with was treating children with learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, developmentally challenged children. And we had great success with that. We had attracted patients literally from all over the world. And then really, the way that we became involved with these niches was just a necessity of patients coming to us with problems that we needed to solve, and digging into different resources and different methods of helping them. And as a result of the success we had with the children with learning difficulties, other patients started coming to us with other problems. So we got into treating digestive issues, Crohn's, colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, diabetes. And we don't treat those diseases, but we treat people who have those conditions to help them improve their health. And we found some very successful ways of doing that.
Awesome.
And now the area that we're focusing on is spinal decompression. Patients who have very serious spinal issues, herniated disc, bulging disc, spinal stenosis, because there's really not much out there to help those people.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's awesome. So how can I help you in the next 20, 25 minutes or so?
Well, my biggest challenge is we developed some very unique skills treating patients one-on-one, and being able to develop a program that gets away from treating people one-on-one and offering them something that we can teach through a course and so on. So the transition from hands-on to helping people with information.
Awesome. So really the delivery side of things more than anything, right?
That's right. Yeah, developing and course content.
Perfect. So the first thing and obviously you'll get to experience this as one of our new clients, but one of the first things that we do is we need to identify a single target market. Because when we're looking to see, it's one thing when you have a clinic and people just find you and they come in, and it's relatively easy compared to building an online business. Because with an online business, people don't just walk down the street and stumble upon your website. And in order for you to quickly grow online, it's really important to narrow down your focus to one single target market, dealing with one specific pain or problem. So do you have an idea of who that audience might be?
Yeah, it's people who have had chronic pain for some time that they've tried a lot of different solutions and they haven't been able to find a solution to. So specifically people with chronic neck and back problems.
Perfect. All right, so the next thing now is if we look at a timeline, and this is later, so this could be a couple years down the road, could be a couple months down the road. This is now, this is bad, this is good, and in the middle, we have the clients. So we want to think of two possible trajectories. If things go well, they end up over here. So on the green line. And if things don't go well, they, in terms of they don't find you, for instance, and they continue down their path, they end up down here. Now, the next thing, does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Kind of paint a trajectory based on people's decisions and whatever of, this is good stuff that can happen, or this is bad stuff that can happen. Now, the thing is, this maps really nicely with something we spent a lot of time talking about in HPA, which we call the emotion inventory, but I'll just quickly map it out here. We talk about, these are our wants and aspirations. And these are fears. And these are frustrations. So things that are currently frustrated about, and if these frustrations continue on, they'll manifest into fears. The fears are the things that, down the road, people want to avoid. So if we were to identify, let's just for the sake of time, identify what you in your experience would deem as the number one want. Actually, let's start with the frustration. What is the number one frustration, something they're currently dealing with that is really just like nagging at them when it comes to chronic neck and back pain?
Well, these are people that are having difficulty performing the normal activities of daily living. They're having trouble working. They're having trouble doing the things that they need to do at home. And the frustration is that they get passed from one doctor to the next. They wait 6 months to a year to see a specialist, and the specialist spends 10 minutes with them and tells them that either they can't help them or the only option is surgery.
Cool. And how does that manifest? Like, what are they afraid of if this continues for the next several years? Like, what do they worry about at night if this were to continue and prolong?
Well, we see different levels of frustration, certainly. Some that are just, sick and tired of being in pain, to we get people in that if we can't help them, they don't know what they're going to do.
And does that mean, are they ever linking this to, you talked about they can't perform daily activities. Is that something that they worry about in the sense of not being able to be fully present with their kids or grandkids, not being able to live their life to the fullest in the sense of doing things they love to do, travel, gardening, sports, etc.? What does that look like?
Yeah, certainly all of those things, and the fear of getting to the point where they can't look after themselves at all and being dependent on other people to even be able to go to the bathroom or prepare a meal, or they get to the point where they're literally bedridden. Yeah,
that's a big one. I mean, I think loss of independence, and then obviously being the burden on their family, which is something that a lot of people don't want to have as well. So that's great. Well, not great for them, but for this exercise. So what do they want? So what do they want when they come to see you? If we think of a want as something rather immediate, right? A want is, if we were to look at this timeline, let's say the aspirations were, 1 year down the road, what is something that you can do for them in the next 30 days to 90 days that can give them some immediate wins, some immediate relief, or help them achieve a specific outcome? What are maybe one or two wants that they come to you with?
Well, the first thing is to reduce their pain level, increase their mobility and ability to function.
Perfect. Okay. So let's just keep it simple like that. And then aspirationally, so what does that allow them to do in the long term?
Ultimately, they want to be able to lead a normal life. And a lot of them just are fearful that they're never going to be able to do that again.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if we were to, so in order for, let's do this. If you were to identify, so if to move someone from where they are to where they want to be, to help them move along this green line, to help them get those immediate wants and those eventual aspirations, remove the frustrations and prevent the fears, if there were 3 things that you would prescribe to someone other than physical adjustments, manipulation, etc., what would those 3 things be?
Lifestyle modifications in terms of posture or the way they sleep, the way they sit, teaching them how to move correctly.
All right. So,
is one.
So we'll say posture. You said move correctly, so proper movements or movement mechanics, for instance?
Yeah, how to lift, how to get out of a chair, those types of things.
And what is one more?
Well, exercise and nutrition.
Okay. So we've got 3 core things that they have to do. Now, if we look at what's, I'm just going to draw this out a little bit. So when it comes to posture, what is something that people do at a 1.0 level? Like what is kind of the basic, like so what I'm trying to get at is we're going to look at each one of these 3 and we're going to look at what is the standard advice that is not really serving them? Like what's the commonly held belief? What's the common prescription that's just like blah, that doesn't really serve these individuals? So what would we say just really quickly under posture, or something philosophically that you believe that isn't correct, and then we'll have a flip side to what you would prescribe as the better way of doing it?
Well, back pain is literally an epidemic in our society today. And there's several different factors for that. The sedentary lifestyle is certainly a big one. Sitting is very bad for your spine, and people spend most of their day sitting.
Okay. And so if we stop there for a second, we say sitting is a problem, right? What do most people say in terms of from a posture / movement perspective? If they're going to say stand, don't sit, is that the common advice, or what do you think most people are being recommended when it comes to sitting, or prevent, or not spending as much time doing that?
Yeah, people are told to improve their posture when they're sitting, and they're some people are recommending standing desks instead. And what we find is that doing one position, doesn't matter what it is, for long periods of time is not good. That what people really should be doing is changing their posture frequently. Cool. So just using a standing desk isn't going to fix the problem, because they're standing for long periods of time. So they need to be able to alternate between standing, sitting, and moving.
So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, like, the 1.0 version, like the typical advice is just stand, it's better. You're saying standing alone is not enough because it's a static position. It's not solving the problem. You need to alternate your positions. Cool. Right. What about with respect to movements? What is something that, obviously this can go down a bunch of different paths. People say, go for a run. Other people say lift. Other people say do yoga, Pilates. Like, what is typically something that, you would see prescribed for people when it comes to movements?
People are told to just get active and so on. And now, depending on what the condition is, there isn't a one solution for everybody, depending on what their problem is. Somebody with spinal stenosis, standing and walking becomes a real challenge.
Sure.
And when we're going through a treatment program, one of the most important things that they need to realize is that they should be avoiding aggravating their problem. That's the most important job in the beginning, is just not to aggravate it. So doing things that, if they're getting sore while they're doing it, or if they're sore after, they need to modify those positions or movements that they're doing.
And so we could say just the common advice might be like, just move more or pick an activity you enjoy doing type of thing.
That's right.
Okay. And then you're just taking it one step further by saying, that's fine, just avoid anything that's going to aggravate the problem. Because if you're running and your back hurts, you should probably stop running, even though, it's a form of movement.
Right.
What about when it comes to exercise or nutrition?
Okay. Well, there's some common issues that we see. People, the first thing they are told when they have back problems is to strengthen their core. And for a lot of people, that means doing, strengthening their stomach muscles, which that's only one of the muscle groups in the core. And if they just focus on that, they quite often will actually make the situation worse.
Sure.
Because they're pulling their posture forward if you just strengthen your abdominal muscles. The core also includes all of your back muscles, the muscles that twist the spine. And so they all need to be working and in balance.
All right. So we'll just say, just for the sake of simplicity, more of a balanced core protocol.
Right.
Okay, cool. So if we were to look at, the three proponents, so the three components, so posture, movements, exercise, nutrition, what are the tangible outcomes that those create or that those lead to? So if we have posture, we have movements, and we've got, I'll just put exercise and diet. If we were to map these out, so if we they don't have to be individually, but if they were to, as a group, lead to tangible outcomes, so things that we can measure, quantify, etc., what might those be?
Well, really taking care of those things makes them a better patient for us to treat, because they're not aggravating the problem. They're helping instead of hindering. They still require treatment in most cases. These things alone aren't going to solve their problem.
So how do we quantify that? So if someone comes to you not because they want to be a better patient, right? Someone comes to you because they want to get rid of pain, they want to improve mobility, for instance, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
Do you have ways of measuring, like if we were to take these outcomes, because ultimately what we want to do is we want to take these outcomes and we want to put them on some type of a dial where they're here, for instance, right now in the red, and they start working with you, and over time, they move towards the green. Does that make sense? So this is when it comes to making an offer, especially when someone is not in a clinical setting with you and there's no face-to-face and that inherent kind of toe-to-toe trust that's built. When we're working with people, and even in person, but when we're working with people virtually, there's obviously a certain amount of know, like, and trust that has to be built, but also there needs to be some degree of tangibility to what you're offering. So what we want to think about is when we work together, we're going to help you, improve your posture, better your movements, work on your exercise and diet. And all of that's going to help you achieve the following outcomes. So those following outcomes, if we look back to the wants, probably reduce pain, increase mobility, would those be two that are somehow we can quantify or measure?
We can certainly measure it when they're in the clinic. In terms of them being able to measure it themselves, that there are pain surveys that they can do. They can measure their own posture.
So let's put... And so this is the fun part about developing a coaching program online is you start to think about, so what would you do like in person? If you're looking at someone's posture, is it simply a visual or are you actually assessing them in some way, shape or form?
It's visual. It's measuring range of motion, how they walk, how they move.
Because one of the interesting things is if you think of that and you ask yourself, okay, how can I, if someone is on the other side of the world and they're working on this program with me, and one of the metrics or the dials we're going to look at is improved posture. Okay, so in the clinic, we would do this. We would say, okay, stand up. I want to see you from the side, from the front, etc. Well, maybe they could do that on their own and send in photos of that. Right. So now we have a before where they started, and then obviously a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, for instance. And now we can look at, okay, without them exaggerating their posture, just, whatever the neutral stance is, now we can track over time the before and after of that one specific outcome. Does that work?
Yeah, and I think there are grids that they can use that we could probably. I'm not sure the actual products, but I think they are out there. The grids that they can use themselves at home. Cool.
And then just like another tangible outcome could be something along the lines of, do a lot of patients / clients you work with or clients you'd want to work with in the future, are they actively engaged in various hobbies or sports?
They would like to be, most of them. And that's one of the motivating factors is they aren't able to do their hobbies. And they'd like to be able to get back to them.
So assuming no calendar conflicts, one of the things we could look at is number of days spent in activity, right? So for instance, if I love tennis and I have the ability, or if someone is a bit older and they play golf, because you can kind of play golf by yourself, we can look at over the course of 30 days, how many days of golf were you able to play? Because now it's a black or white. I played 4 days of golf. Or I know that skiers talk about how many days on the mountain, every season. And they'll talk about like, I was at like 54 days. And for non-skiers, they're like, what are you talking about? But that might be something very interesting to look at because that's a quantitative number that can give us a really good indication that, okay, before we started working together, how often were you playing golf on a monthly basis? They're like, never, because I was in pain. Great. Well, not great, but okay. Over the next 30 days, we're going to track what that number looks like. And we're just going to document that. So maybe the first month it's 1, right? Or maybe it's 5, or maybe it's whatever. By the end of 90 days or however long the program is, that number, that dial has moved in the direction of, well, before I started, I wasn't able to play golf. And now I'm playing golf almost every other day. That's a pretty amazing transformation, right?
Yeah.
So would that make sense in terms of quantifying like days in activity, for instance?
Yeah, and for some of these people, it's even just being able to stand or walk for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So you find what that metric is, like if it's, time standing, time walking, like if they're wearing a Fitbit, how many steps they're able to take, all sorts of cool stuff you can track here. But the most important thing is that it's tangible, because not only is that good for your business in terms of social proof down the road, but it gives someone a very visual finish line, right? And they can see that manifesting in their life. And then if we think of what those tangible outcomes lead to in terms of meaning, right? Then you can think of, okay, well, that gives you more freedom, for instance, right? Or, other more esoteric outcomes that people want. They want to feel more free. They want to, whatever those things are, right? But I think for now, just really dialing in those tangible outcomes is important. So far, so good?
Yeah. We really try to get people away from gauging their progress by symptoms, because the symptoms can be up and down, and it's hard to remember what you felt like yesterday as opposed to a month or two ago.
Yep, for sure. So then when we look at the, where were we? So posture, movements, exercise, diet. So those are kind of like the three core pillars of your program. So if I were to, map this out in a Venn diagram, it would look something like this. So we would have posture, movement, exercise, and diet. And in the middle, as all those three come together, we create, freedom, or whatever word describes the ultimate outcome, pain-free, that the person wants. So I want you to, this is what's known as a genius model. A friend of mine, Simon Bowen, an amazing Aussie who, just is amazing with models. But think of this genius model as the kitchen. Okay. So there's a lot of things happening in the kitchen. And what we want to do with your program, your initial program, is we want to think about not every single thing in the kitchen, but we just want to create one recipe. So when we go back up to here, this path, this journey from start to 1 year or 3 years down the road would encompass all of the elements of the kitchen, all of the elements of the genius model, the whole posture, movements, exercise, nutrition. But what we need to focus on is we need to focus on what are the initial things, the step-by-step process we can walk people through so that in 30 to 90 days, they start to see a dramatic improvements in their situation. And so what we call that in our world, we call that a dream come true system. And ultimately what we're doing here is we're taking people from here over to here, right? So they're sad, they're in pain, we move them over to happy, and there's obviously a number of steps along the way. Does that make sense so far?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So if you were to think of, because one of the most important things to think about in any kind of prescription is reducing overwhelm, because a lot of people will stop adherence to something because they just get overwhelmed with something because there's too much stuff. So if we think of posture, movement, and this is where, beyond the scope of this interview, where you want to do some thinking around, is within posture, movement, exercise, and diet, what are the most immediate things you can prescribe that are, based on where they're coming in, easy to implement and will give them quick wins, so that by the end of the time frame of your program, how long do you think it might take for someone to come to you with chronic back, neck pain and then be more or less, maybe not fully free of it, but at least a dramatic reduction in symptoms so they can get back to living life the way they want to?
Everybody responds differently. Some people notice a dramatic change even after the first treatment. Typically with somebody who has a serious issue like this, we'll put them on a 6-week program, and our success rate is extremely high,
Cool.
An 80 to 90% success rate, and a dramatic change in their quality of life.
Perfect. So we say, what can someone do in 6 weeks to get there? And so if, again, they're not coming into the clinic, they're not getting adjusted, they're not getting any manual therapy, what are the things you can incorporate into your program? What are the milestones that they have to go through to achieve that result in 6 weeks? So if we're just kind of brainstorming really quickly, what might be, let's just look at maybe 3 to 5 things, steps that someone would have to take to get that result in 6 weeks.
This is where it becomes difficult.
And this is where a lot of thinking has to come into this. And obviously we give you frameworks and stuff inside HPA to do this. But if you were to, even at a very meta level, like a really high level without getting into details, what might just, a couple things off the top of your mind
that they can do? Well, a lot of these people are heavily medicated, and the medications are quite often causing some serious side effects. Mm-hmm. So that's one of their major goals is to be able to reduce their medications as quickly as possible.
Yep.
So what we'll quite often do is just starting to use ice on the inflamed area is quite often just as effective as the medication without the side effects. So learning how to use that properly.
So I'll just write down reduce inflammation.
Yeah.
As maybe the first step.
Yeah.
What else? What would be next? Once we've cooled some of the inflammation, what would be the next step?
Well, increasing strength and ability to move, to be able to walk, and they, depending on what their problem is, it may be sitting that aggravates the problem, so they can't sit for longer than a few minutes. Some other people, it's being able to stand or walk, or whatever activity that they have trouble with, being able to increase the length of time they can do it.
Cool. Awesome. Once they've accomplished that, then what?
Then the next step is gradually increasing their activity level, where they're starting to be able to get back to work or do their normal activities at home or hobbies and so on.
Perfect. So obviously this is a very, what can I think of the word? Surface level approach to this, but so we have someone that comes in, they've got neck, back pain. First step is we reduce inflammation. Then we increase strength and their ability to move and be active. Once they've conquered that, then we gradually increase their activity level to the point where they can resume and maybe exceed what they were doing before. So by the end of the 6 weeks, they move from pain, no mobility, to, let's just call it pain-free. Obviously, it doesn't have to be pain-free, but pain-free and increased range of motion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
So then part of the next step for you then is looking at, okay, under reduced inflammation, like what are the things, what am I going to teach someone if someone were to ask you, okay, how do I reduce inflammation? Instead of you repeating yourself 1,000 times, whatever you would tell most of your patients is what you would turn into some type of video training, for instance, or if you don't want to be on video, you don't have to be, but some type of training that is recorded and everyone will have access to for as long as they need. Any client that comes in now or 2 years from now will be roughly the same. So you want to start thinking through, okay, well, if I'm saying reduce inflammation, there might be some sub-levels, like we talk about ice, we talk about anti-inflammatory foods. There's different things that we can talk about in respect to inflammation. With respect to increasing strength, we can talk about things like body weight. We can talk about using weights, how to lift properly, et cetera, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to take these higher level concepts, these categories, and you're just going to break them down into not a huge overwhelming volume of things, but literally just a couple bite-sized pieces that someone can check off real easily, take action on, and see some type of improvement as they move forward and so on from there. So that's the kind of the thinking from the high level of, here's who I want to work with, here are the problems that they're going through, here's what they want, and then moving it all the way down into the thinking of how do we start to map out this program. Now, then obviously you can start talking about or thinking about how is it going to be delivered? Are you going to have video trainings, which we have? Are you going to have a group coaching call that you do once a week? Are you going to have individual check-ins if you want to? You don't have to. There's all sorts of different things you can throw into this. But are you feeling a little bit more clear about how to start to map some of this out, Alan?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
And that first step, reducing inflammation, there's different vitamin supplements that they can take.
Yep.
And I guess one option would be including those products in
100%.
Or giving them the opportunity, telling them what they are and giving them the opportunity to purchase them themselves.
Yep.
I'm not sure which would be the best way to go there.
Well, I think this is the beautiful thing about doing this process is you start to think about if you only got paid after you got a client or results, or if you didn't get the client or results, you would be beheaded, if this were Game of Thrones, for instance, what would have to be included in this program? Like, what would have to be like, oh my God, they have to be taking this. And if they don't take this, I could lose my head. Thinking through it in that way becomes really exciting, because now you start thinking about, yeah, we could include a vitamin protocol. And because it would be a premium priced program, you would include that for them, ideally, right? So they get everything shipped to their door. They don't even have to leave their house. You've done all the thinking for them. You know, we've got clients who will send kettlebells to people's doorsteps instead of having them go to the store to buy the kettlebell. So, and that's all factored in to the investment in the program. And that increases the value of the program as well as the perceived value, right? Where you're absorbing the cost, but the cost is obviously, you know, factored into the cost of the program. So you're thinking about, okay, well, how can we reduce inflammation? What are some things that can build strength? Maybe we can send them some bands, right? Some TheraBands or resistance bands, all sorts of cool stuff like that. Not that you have to, but it's a really good creative thinking exercise to start thinking through and just making your program amazing.
Right.
That's why I think there's such a big opportunity for this type of coaching program in today's day and age. And that's really how you get clients' results.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Cool, awesome. So I know we've covered a lot of ground here. So I just, you know, before we finish off, what have you found most helpful from our conversation today?
Well, it gives me a foundation to work on that it's a roadmap that I can follow, that I know where to start. I know the components that I need to include and the objective at the end. So that's very useful.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Alan. And thank you for taking the time, for allowing us to kind of pull back the curtains and do some deep dive thinking on this. That's been a lot of fun for me. I love doing this stuff. If you guys are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, hopefully you found this extremely helpful in your respective businesses as well. Remember to tune into the podcast 3 times a week. We got more awesome interviews and deep dives coming your way. Alan, I want to thank you once again for taking the time for joining me, and looking forward to working with you more deeply inside HPA. And for everyone else who's tuned in, thanks so much, guys. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks for your help.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Healthpreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, here's what I'd like you to do right now. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Healthpreneur Podcast on iTunes. And while you're there, leave us a rating or review. It helps us get in front of more people and change more lives. And if you're ready to start or scale your health or fitness coaching business and want to start getting in front of more people, working with them at a higher level without trading time for money, then I invite you to check out our free 7-figure health business blueprint training, totally free right now. And you can do so at healthpreneurgroup.com/training. For now, thank you so much for joining us. Continue to be great, do great, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.